Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. Thank you very much. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 4, text 4. So Arjuna will ask a question, and in this question he is going to help Lord Krishna to reaffirm that the limitations that apply to living entities do not apply to him. There are certain limitations. There is a difference between an ordinary living entity and the supreme living entity, the supreme personality of Godhead. Now also, from standing back a little bit, what is happening is we have been discussing the science of yoga, and it has also been called yajna, and it is also understood to be the science of performing one's prescribed duties. But now, in the next few verses, another topic is going to come into the picture side by side. The topic of prescribed duties is going to continue, but also there is a new topic, and that is of the personality of Krishna, the specific personality. So you have the topic of yoga. It's centered around our need, but also the topic of Krishna, who he is, because our prescribed duties are for him. Yoga is with him. Yajna is for him. So he is also important. And that's what is coming up in these few verses. Arjuna vacha aparam bhavato janma. Aparam, para means superior, aparam means junior. Bhavato janma, your birth is junior. Param janma vivasvata. Compared to Vivasvan. Katham etad vijanya. Tvam ado proktavaniti. Katham, how am I to understand this? Your birth is contemporary. It's the same as mine with Arjuna. But Vivasvan is very old. So how, Katham, how can I enter this? How can I understand Vijanyan? Can I know that originally, long time ago, Proktavan, you spoke like this. Very nice. Vijanyan, how shall I understand? How can I know this? Arjuna said, the sun god Vivasvan is senior by birth to you. How am I to understand that in the beginning you instructed this science to him? So there are two ways of looking at this. One is, it's not a good question, but it is also a good question, because it's not a good question because there's some disbelief. There's disbelief. Krishna said, I spoke. Really, you should believe it. But, so not good. You're disbelieving your spiritual master. He just told you. You should have faith. But it's also good because he's saying the lacking is on my part. Katham etad vijani. How can I understand vijani? How can I mean? I'm having difficulty. So, Prabhupada will discuss both of these points in the program, but I just thought I'd mention it. So Arjuna, Prabhupada begins, Arjuna is an accepted devotee of the Lord. Because just previous verse, Bhaktosi me sakha, Krishna just said, you are my bhakta. Bhaktosi. So how could he not believe Krishna's words? How could you be a devotee and not believe? So Prabhupada is raising that question. So there's a belief on one side. Krishna spoke. The spiritual master says something, I should believe it, but I don't understand it. I still don't understand it. Okay, so two things. So Prabhupada actually said, pointing out that this disbelief is actually unacceptable. He's just by that question. He's comparing it to behavior of a demon. It's unlike the person who is a devotee. It's the opposite. Demon says, oh, I don't believe this. So devotee should not act like a demon. So actually Prabhupada is saying such kind of doubts should not, he's not encouraging. He's not encouraging this in a student. And that means certainly he doesn't want his followers to be doubtful. Srila Prabhupada's followers doesn't want that. And in fact, if you refer to many of his conversations, many of them, Srila Prabhupada would become irritated when a disciple would persist in saying, not only I don't understand, but I'm having a hard time accepting it. So, because Prabhupada would say, if you remember, if you recall, he would say, why should they not accept? Have you heard this? Why should you doubt it? So, he is not, all democratic, everyone has right. So really the model student of Gita should not disbelieve. Sorry? Vox populi, right. Populi. So the model student of the Gita actually is a person who never disbelieves Krishna's words. He never. Because to do so kind of implies that you do not accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Big thing. And Supreme Personality of Godhead means the personality whose word cannot be questioned. The Supreme. He doesn't need any more proofs other than his own word. Just like once upon a time, the law was whatever the king said. That was the law. That's the essence of the law. In its most essential feature, the law was the king's word. So he doesn't need to give you a reference, the king. Krishna, okay. So now Prabhupada, so that was just my little amplification of the point. Prabhupada writes, the fact is that Arjuna is not inquiring for himself, but for those who do not believe in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or for the demons who do not like the idea that Krishna should be accepted as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So for others, for them only, Arjuna inquires on this point. So I'm going to now be more selective about the parts I read. This is not really to cover, I want to give an overview, so I'll not be reading everything. But you're welcome to read as I'm skipping. Now, Prabhupada also says that, well, in Arjuna's case, this really didn't apply because he proves that in the 10th chapter when he says Param Brahma, Param Dham, Pavitra, Paramam Bhavan. So he has an understanding. Now, of course, Krishna also appeared as the son of Devaki on this earth. So this is now pointing out that Katham Etad Vijanya. Katham, how do I? Because now Krishna is a contemporary. Okay? He is the son of Devaki. How Krishna remained the same Supreme Personality of Godhead, the eternal, original person, is very difficult for an ordinary man to understand. So yes, that poses a difficulty. You're son of Devaki, same age as Arjuna. So, Vivaswan, sun god, many millions of years ago. So, now, Prabhupada embarks on a nice point that if there is a question or a doubt, the only person who can allay that doubt is Krishna, because he is the supreme authority. There is no superior authority. Therefore, to clarify this point, Arjuna put this question before Krishna so that he himself could speak authoritatively. That Krishna is the supreme authority is accepted by the whole world, not only at the present, but from time immemorial. And the demons alone reject him. So this is Krishna as the authority. Just, if there's a person who can settle this question, Krishna can. Nobody else can. And of course, demons have problems of their own, so what they think we don't have to consider too much. And there is a propaganda like that. One demonic propaganda is that Krishna became God after 5,000 years ago. In other words, he wasn't God before. So now that is refuted by Prabhupada. Anyway, since Krishna is the authority accepted by all, Arjuna put this question before him, in order that Krishna would describe himself without being depicted by the demons, who always try to distort him in a way understandable to the demons and their followers. What this is saying is that if Krishna didn't explain it, it would be a feast day for the demons to impose their idea. But Krishna does explain, so that's very good. It preempts, it stops that kind of problem arising. You know how it is, somebody says, well, Prabhupada never said you can have your own disciples. So, there's a tendency to find something and to amplify it according to your own idea. This is going on all the time. What he has said, ocean of, on the point that this teaching has to be perpetuated from spiritual master to disciple. People try to find one little thing and dismantle it on that, On one tape, he said, you are Ritvik. Yes, he did say it, but that's not for all time, forever. Dismantling the whole parampara system. So this is relevant to this verse. It's not, because earlier it said evam parampara praptam. So very important. There's no dispute, there's no doubt, but there is a tendency, a demonic tendency, which tries to rig or to twist something according to one's own convenience. Something we have to avoid. So here, Krishna did not want people to imagine that maybe it's not true, or it was figurative. You see, this is another thing, figurative. That when Krishna spoke to the sun god, he was, poetic license, like that. No, he did speak to the sun god, like we calculated in the previous class, 120 million years ago at least. So Prabhupada writes, it is necessary that everyone, for his own interest, knows the signs of Krishna. Therefore, when Krishna himself speaks about himself, it is auspicious for all the worlds. Okay, so we leave the section out on the demons again. I've already... the devotees will always worship authoritative statements of Krishna because they are always eager to know more and more about him. The atheists who consider Krishna an ordinary man may in this way come to know that. So Prabhupada makes like 4 points about Krishna. That from Krishna we can learn about Krishna. And the first point is that Krishna is superhuman. That's number 1. Number 2, he is Satchidanand Vigraha. That he is the eternal form of bliss and knowledge. 3, that he is transcendental. And finally, he is above the domination of the modes of material nature. Now these are not like set in stone number of points. These are among other things, Krishna is superhuman. In other words, he is not, has the same limitations of a human. That his form, his body is essentially different from us. So in other words, he can be my contemporary, but he can also have spoken to the sun god. Because his form doesn't have the limitations of a gross body made of earth, water, fire. Because his is made of Satchidananda. It's a body made of those elements, Satchidananda, eternity, knowledge and bliss. He is transcendental. And therefore he is also above the modes of nature. Or the influence of time is, he is not limited by these factors that limit material bodily life. So Arjuna is putting his question before the Lord is simply an attempt by the devotee to defy the atheistic attitude of persons who consider Krishna to be an ordinary human being subject to the modes of material nature. So Arjuna has put his question. Now, Krishna is going to answer. See, the reason why Arjuna's question was nice also was it believes, the student is believing that there is an answer. See, there is a kind of sad scenario that can happen when a person thinks, oh, this is a sticky problem, I better not ask this question because, things will get unstuck. It will come down, it will break apart. But the disciple has faith that whilst I can't understand, in other words, it takes a lot of humility to believe that it's my inability. Usually, the disciple thinks, well, I know, I know this is problem. So, it requires real humility to think, I really don't see how this can be answered, but I'll ask. So there is some credit side to Arjuna as well, a plus side. It's not just, Prabhupada obviously took the one where questions are belligerent, argumentative, fighting spirit. I don't agree with you. But there is a side which is submissive inquiry. I'd like to know. I don't know. So anyway. Now, in the next 4 verses, this is very important. I don't know how we're going to do it, but this tomorrow, so between today and tomorrow we should cover, hopefully. 4 verses, Krishna explains 4 specific features about himself. Okay? The verse we're going to study now, 5th verse, and 3 more verses after that. They give 4 specific features about Krishna's appearance. There's something special. So this answers Arjuna's point how katham etad vijaniyam? How am I to understand? With these four things, you can understand why Krishna could have spoken or did speak through the Sun God. Okay, and I'm going to tell you those four things right now before we even begin. The first one speaks of how his appearances, his births, his incarnations are spiritual, not material. That's the verse we're going to read. The second one is, when does he make these appearances? His appearance is spiritual, not material, but when does he? When does he? There's a time, there's a question of schedule here. The third one, the third verse, answers why or with what purpose he comes. What's the purpose behind his appearance? And the fourth one is interesting. It says the benefit to us of knowing these three features properly. These are the three features of Krishna's appearance. If we know them properly, there is a specific benefit to us. Very good, 4 verses. In other words, these are the 4 features of Krishna. And one of them happens to be just knowing Krishna benefits us. Okay. So now the first of these 4. I had an opportunity to discuss this just Monday on the story of Bharat Maharaj, who had become Jad Bharat. And one of the interesting points was, and it was in the Sanskrit, that really he was living one life from the time of being the son of Rishabdev as a deer and as Bharat, Jad Bharat, because he never forgot. You see? So for Krishna, all his appearances are one. There's no gap. There's no death. You see, Prabhupada had a very interesting definition of death. Is that we forget our last life. That's the definition of death. Very interesting. It's like when we don't pay attention, we miss an amazing secret. Pay attention, he does right. You will read carefully. He says death is nothing but forgetfulness of your last life. It's like, you can go through Krishna consciousness for 30, 40 years and not notice it. And then one day, but it's there, it's in black and white. So in this verse, we're seeing that Krishna actually mentions this principle, that he hasn't forgotten. It's the same Krishna from the one who spoke to Vivaswan millions of years ago. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Bahuni me vyatitani janmani tava cha Arjuna tani aham veda sarvani na tvam veda parantapa. So the word was veda, veda, to know. The personality of God had said, many births both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer of the enemy. Remembrance, this is it. Veda, I know all those appearances. In other words, oh my dear Arjuna, I'm actually not your contemporary. Because you have forgotten, but I haven't. That makes us not contemporaries. You were there too. But I know it just like you know your life in this life. I know it. Very interesting, isn't it? I mean, we dismiss this. But Krishna is saying it's all to do with Veda Tani aham Veda sarvani. I know all of them. Na tvam Veda, but you do not. Tvam, you do not, I do. There's a distinction. In other words, had Arjuna been aware of all those, he wouldn't have asked the question. He would have said, yeah, I remember. I remember you spoke. But he doesn't remember. So Krishna is saying that's the difference between you and me. We sometimes think, well, really, is everything so dependent on memory? Yes. The answer is yes, it is. We think that memory is like, okay, because you know why that is? We forget. But we think that's not a crime. If I forget something, we don't think that something awful has happened. We treat it as sublime, almost okay, it's okay to forget. But actually Krishna is saying, no, forgetfulness is an important sign. It's the distinction that Krishna is making now. Okay. So there's another point about vyatitani, just a Sanskrit word. Vyatit means what has passed. Okay? And so the word for word was, have passed, vyatitani. But it also means that past not as in dead. In the sense it has happened. Vyatit has two meanings. One is when something has passed away, as in died. It was and is gone. Vyatit also means something like it happened. Vyatit means it happened. Okay. So in this sense, Vyatit here, is Krishna is saying, well, so many things have happened. But in my case, they didn't die. You see? For us, they die. Like, I once had a toy car, but I don't have it now. But Krishna, something happened, but it is still there today. It hasn't died. Okay. Something you'll appreciate as we go through the purport. So what this means with Krishna's body, because Arjuna is asking about Krishna's aparam bhavam, in other words, you're junior. Krishna is saying, well, though an incident took place, it hasn't actually passed away. In other words, there's some feature about Krishna, in other words, everything he does is eternal. This is a roundabout way of saying Krishna's pastimes are eternal. They don't actually get relegated to dead history. They're still present today. It's an interesting thing, just to bear in mind, and when we read the purport it'll become clear. In the Brahma Samhita, Prabhupada is elaborating on the phrase Bahuni me Janmani. I have many births or appearances. In the Brahma Samhita, we have information of many incarnations of the Lord. It is stated there, Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Ananta Rupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navaryomanam Cha Vedeshu Durlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhakto Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, who is the original person, absolute, infallible, without beginning. Although expanded into unlimited forms, he is still the same original, the oldest, and the person always appearing as a fresh youth. Such eternal, blissful, all-knowing forms of the Lord are usually not understood by even the best Vedic scholars, but they are always manifest to pure, unalloyed devotees. So, Krishna's form is absolute and infallible. Okay. Then Prabhupada says, it is also stated, Ramadi Murtishu Kala Niyamena Tishtan Nana Avataramakarod Bhuvaneshu Kintu Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Parama Pumanyo Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead Govinda, who is always situated in various incarnations such as Rama, Nrsimha, and many sub-incarnations as well, but who is the original personality of Godhead known as Krishna, and who incarnates personally also. So incarnate really here means comes. The word incarnate, what it means in the dictionary, means to take on a form you didn't have. In other words, carnal means form, gross. But here the sense is comes. In other words, he's already there, but he comes before us. Okay, becomes manifest. That's the word in the Sanskrit. Swayam Sama Bhavat. Abhavat means to become revealed, to become manifest. So English language problems, so the word is incarnate, but not in its pure meaning. Because pure meaning is something that doesn't have a form, became form. So it has a built-in kind of problem in the definition. So in the Vedas also it is said that the Lord, although one without a second, manifests himself in innumerable forms. He is like the Vaidurya stone, which changes color yet still remains one. All those multi-forms are understood by the pure unalloyed devotees, but not by a simple study of the Vedas. Okay, so Krishna has forms, and they're kind of special. Okay, so just keep that in your mind, then we go on. So now Prabhupada refers to the fact that Arjuna was there also when Krishna spoke to the sun god. Devotees like Arjuna are constant companions of the Lord. And whenever the Lord incarnates, the associate devotees also incarnate in order to serve the Lord in different capacities. Now, so this is the point. The king doesn't travel alone. He has his own entourage. Krishna is not alone. When we speak of Krishna, he is not alone and everything else is void. He has his abode, his paraphernalia, his servants, his devotees, his flute, the atmosphere, everything, the water, everything. This is a special king. Everything, even his land travels with him. Everything travels with him. So Arjuna is one of these devotees. And in this verse, it is understood that some millions of years ago, when Lord Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita to the sun god Vivasvan, Arjuna in a different capacity was also present. So now Prabhupada has pointed out, Krishna is there in one of his forms all the time, and even in his own form. But he's also with his devotees. Arjuna is a special devotee. He is an eternal companion of the Lord, always with him, in some form, shape or another. Never without Arjuna. So they're called Nitya Parishad, always with the Lord. Now Prabhupada makes the distinction between, even though they're both together, they're not the same. They're not equal. But the difference between the Lord and Arjuna is that the Lord remembered the incident, whereas Arjuna could not remember. That is the difference between the part and parcel living entity and the Supreme Lord. See, that's what I said earlier. One thinks, well, just on memory, everything hinges. So much hinges on memory. Yes, it does. It hinges on memory. Although Arjuna is addressed herein as the mighty hero who could subdue the enemies, he is unable to recall what had happened in his various past births. So it's an inability, because sarvasya cham riti sanivishto matta smriti. Our knowledge, our remembrance is dependent on the Lord supplying it. But the Lord is not dependent on anybody supplying it. He already possesses all memory, all knowledge. But we are dependent. That's part and parcel. He blesses us. We don't have independent power to recall. Smriti, Jnanam, upon. 3 things we're not independently able to do. To remember, to have knowledge, and to even forget. You know how it is? It's strange, isn't it? Forgetfulness is strange. You would think, well, I surely have power over forgetfulness. No, actually it's not true. Drunkards. Most of you are not experienced with being a drunkard. Neither am I, by the way. Just from hearing. Experience gained by hearing. They're trying to forget. So they drink. They're unable to forget. And they want to forget. And they can't forget. So they drink. So it's not within your control. Therefore, a living entity, however great he may be in the material estimation, can never equal the Supreme Lord. So therefore it's not a minor point, this forgetfulness or this remembrance. It is the point. Our memory is dependent on the Lord giving it to us. But the Lord is possessing it completely. There's an interesting thing that defies our ability to comprehend. That Krishna's memory is such that he knows what's going to happen. For him, what's going to happen is the same as something that has happened and is happening. For us, there's a distinction. Because, again, we are dependent living entities. And he is independent. Swarat. You see that word Swarat, independent. Swaratene Brahma Hridaya Adikav. He is not limited even by things that have yet not happened. Just try to see how independent he is. And just see how dependent we are. Independent. Even when you're the eternal associate of the Lord, what to speak of if you're a conditioned living entity? Arjuna, he's a dependent living entity, part and parcel. So if Krishna allows him to remember, he can remember, otherwise he can't. It's interesting, this also ties in with prayer. Prabhupada one time said that we should pray when we come to the deity that, my Lord, please do not allow me to forget that I am your eternal self. That was one of his suggestions of how to pray. We have funny notions of prayer. Give me this, but our difficulty is we forget. If you forget your eternal servant, then you will act in a fashion that will be regrettable later on. Okay. Where was I? Okay. Anyone who is a constant companion of the Lord is certainly a liberated person, but he cannot be equal to the Lord. The Lord is described in the Brahma Samhita as infallible, achyuta, which means that he never forgets himself, even though he is in material contact. So just because he appears in the material world has no influence upon him. That's Krishna's unique. So like I said, there are 4 things about Krishna's personality, his appearances, his incarnations. And the first one is, he doesn't forget. So we think, oh, that's not a major thing, He's powerful, he's supreme, he's this. But this is very important. The first thing Krishna wants Arjuna to understand, us to understand, that Krishna doesn't have this difficulty. For him, it's not like, oh, Arjuna, I also forgot. No, Krishna does not forget. Never. I'm reminded of an interesting anecdote that somebody showed Prabhupada a picture of Krishna where he looked sad. So Prabhupada said, no, that's not Krishna. Everyone is surprised, like, why? No, because Krishna is never sad. But then I think he adjusted it by saying something. Anyway, but the point is, straight away, the Supreme Personality of Godhead doesn't forget. You can't portray in your mental speculation in any way that Krishna ever forgets, because he's different from the living entity. The living entity has this difficulty. Krishna says, I never forget. He's saying here very clearly. But we have that difficulty. Okay. Therefore, the Lord and the living entity can never be equal in all respects, even if the living entity is as liberated as Arjuna. This point about as liberated as Arjuna suggests that there are different kinds of liberation. But Arjuna is on a very high liberated platform. Even if you're as liberated as him, you are not equal to Krishna. Now Prabhupada goes on to the point that Bhakta si me sakacheti rahasyam, from the previous verse, that he can know something of Krishna. Although Arjuna is a devotee of the Lord, he sometimes forgets the nature of the Lord. But by the divine grace, a devotee can at once understand the infallible condition of the Lord, whereas a non-devotee or a demon cannot understand his transcendental nature. So the idea that when this answer is given, is it an empirical answer? The question is it something that can be verified by everybody? No. Not only a person who's a devotee can understand the distinction, the significance that Krishna doesn't forget. For him, that's an answer. But if you're an atheist, a disbelieving person, the answer means nothing to them. You see, he has a basis upon which he wants to understand something, and the basis itself is faulty. The criterion is faulty. He's expecting, the materialist, the atheist, he's expecting that if you spoke to the sun god, you should look 120 million years old. You see the point? The difficulty. Otherwise you can't convince him. You can't be as young as me and have spoken to the sun god. So it's a faulty. But a devotee, he can understand. And there's an interesting phrase Prabhupada used, by the divine grace, a devotee. So, we call Srila Prabhupada his divine grace. Something to meditate. Now, actually, if you do a little bit more introspection yourself, this means by hearing. By hearing. I won't elaborate on it. You can do your own homework. By the divine grace means by hearing, a devotee can at once understand the infallible condition, just by that hearing. Consequently, this description in the Gita cannot be understood by demonic brains. So now Prabhupada refers to Jatitani, which I elaborated on earlier. Krishna remembered acts which were performed by him millions of years before, but Arjuna could not, despite the fact that both Krishna and Arjuna are eternal in nature. Right? It's not like Arjuna dies and born again. Everyone is eternal. But there's still this distinction that Arjuna is liberated, but he still cannot recall. But Krishna can. We may also note herein that a living entity forgets everything due to his change of body. So this is when I told you that death means forgetfulness. Change of body means death. But the Lord remembers because he does not change his Satchidanand body. He never changed. We did. He doesn't. He is Advaita, which means there is no distinction between his body and himself. Everything in relation to him is spirit, whereas the conditioned soul is different from his material body. And because the Lord's body and self are identical, his position is always different from that of the ordinary living entity, even when he descends to the material platform. So in the case of the Lord, there is no passing away of any body. And therefore there is no passing away of any of his pastimes. There is no passing away of any of his activities. As his body continues, his pastimes continue, his activities continue. Everything is ever fresh. Nothing passes away, decays. The demons cannot adjust themselves to this transcendental nature of the Lord, which the Lord himself explains in the following verse. So, tomorrow is how Krishna appears in the material world. Today we discussed that the distinction between the living entity and the Lord is based on remembrance, but specifically that the essence of this remembrance is that Krishna's appearance itself is spiritual. Right? In other words, it's spiritual, therefore, yeah. Now, ours is material. The next verse tomorrow is how when and why. Getting this mixed up, I think. Let me see. Sorry. The verse today is not the 4 verses. They begin tomorrow. That his body is spiritual. That's the verse tomorrow. And then, but part of the spirituality is that he doesn't forget. Okay. Any questions? Is there